Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Patriots Pulse podcast. It's been a week since we've been here, but we're back, and we're back with a very special guest today. We have Matt St. Jean with us. We've been trying to get him on the show for a while. We've had some scheduling issues on our end, so we're glad to finally have him on. Maybe not after the best week of football, but Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. There haven't been a lot of great weeks of football to do this
Good point.
in the past like 2.5, 3 years here. So, you know, I'm just
That's a good point.
excited to be doing this. And anytime you got Drake May as your quarterback, there's always something a little bit exciting to keep you going.
Definitely, definitely. Obviously, I have my co-host Andrew here with me. Andrew, we could see you're back home. How's that? How's it going?
We are. It's going good. Nice to be out of class for once. Just kind of laying back and relaxing now. And well, couldn't really relax after Sunday, but
Yeah,
trying our best.
definitely. But yeah, I'm ready to jump into it. I'm ready to talk some Patriots football. Lots been happening. I know there's always a lot of stuff that positive or negative, mostly negative, that surrounds this team. But I'm excited to hear Matt's opinion on a lot of things too.
Yeah.
Get into it.
So tonight we're going to start off with Patriots versus Dolphins recap. Probably one of the least encouraging games in recent memory that we've seen, probably going back to that Cowboys game last year. So Matt, I just wanted to ask you what your main takeaways were from that game, what you saw.
I actually didn't think it was that level of discouraging. I think it just
Mhm.
really highlighted where this team kind of comes up short right now. Um, like it's this team's weaknesses right now that we knew. The guys can't cover over the middle of the field, and the offense is just way too inconsistent to really do anything. And when you go up against a team that has one really good pass rusher in Chop Robinson who can ruin your day, and an offense where the entire thing is to throw it over the middle of the field and make it hurt, um, it was going to take a lot to make the game close. I think that if you want to take solace in this, most of the mistakes that we saw, I think, are going to be from players who will not be key contributors on the 2025 Patriots, or definitely by the time this is the 2026 Patriots. Or in some cases, the 2024 Patriots, if we want to talk about Michael Jordan getting the axe before we even reach the midway mark of the week. Tough loss, hurts when you lose by that much to a division rival. But I think this is just unfortunately where this roster is and potentially where this coaching staff is at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, a lot of the mistakes were probably from players, like you said, that probably aren't in the Patriots' future. Gerard Mayo even mentioned it today or yesterday that he said it's like it's a fair assessment to say that some of the guys can't be pulled out because of the lack of depth, the lack of talent at the position groups that they have right now. So it's it is rough. It is definitely one of those things that you just have to watch and endure it, and then kind of it's like a gross feeling afterwards. But you kind of have to, I guess you could say, like peel away the layers of of like grossness before you could really see like this is a silver lining in it. Um, Obviously, right now it doesn't look that great, but I have high hopes for the future. The one thing I will say is that this game definitely made me feel a little bit more weary about the coaching staff. I'm not saying that like I just given up on them, but I've been pretty optimistic this whole season with them. That last game was not the best feeling afterward in terms of like my opinion on them. So I would say that was like the biggest negative takeaway. But I agree with what you're saying, like especially with the mistakes from the players that probably aren't going to be here next year. So
What was it? Was it
I mean,
6 combined penalties with Vidarian Lowe and Demontre Jacobs? Something like that. In
yeah,
that
and
in
it
that
was
range.
crazy. Yeah, and it was a crazy amount of like yard. I think it was like negative. I think it was over negative 50 yards, right, in total
I think
penalties
I
for
think I
them.
think it might have been exactly 50 yards in offensive line
Yeah,
penalties.
that's ridiculous. Like that's not even like it's just I know it's like pretty obvious, but like obviously linemen can't get those 50 yards like positively.
Yeah.
So it's like the fact that they negatively impacted the game that much and also gave up sacks and everything. It's like, yeah, that's rough.
yeah, and I think that kind of adds to your point, Carlos, about kind of starting to like really be wary about the coaching staff in terms of just mental toughness and preparation heading into the game. We're just talking about the offensive line issues, the penalties, and also on the defensive end, like guys are really having a difficult time tackling. Yeah, and again, like you guys noted, the amount of inexperienced players that they have stepping in due to injuries and also off the field issues with some of their typical starters. Um, but I think more trying to go off of the point of the offensive line penalties. Do
Mhm.
you what do you guys think that mainly roots from? Is that, like, more coaching staff based? Is it not enough vets on that offensive line in that locker room? What are you guys thinking?
Mm.
My initial read on it is that the tackles aren't very good, and they were trying to get literally a false start on how fast they could get back to protect the quarterback, and they just kept getting caught by it. So some of that's mental, but sometimes it's just the players aren't that good, and you're trying to push the envelope. And
Yeah.
the refs were not having it on Sunday. Some days you get away with it. They just were not going to allow that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just like the cultivation of the amount of like mental errors that the Patriots in general were making. What was that one? I know it's not the lineman that you asked about, but like there was that one call on, I think it was Austin Hooper, right? That he was literally lining up offside. Like that's you can't coach that. You can't like out coach someone making that mental error, in my opinion.
Well, he's a
Because
veteran too. It's not
exactly, yeah.
if he was a rookie, then sure. When it's a veteran, it's one of those where it kind of it's going to be one of two things. Either it's you're relying on a guy to do too much, and like you don't notice that penalty in some offenses because the team is so good that they just get the yards back
Mhm.
right away, but you notice it in this one. But I think the alternative here is that it's possible that there are veteran players who are struggling so much because the team is so poorly coached. I think in some ways this game is almost like a Rorschach test for how you view the coaching staff. If you thought that the problems with this team were the roster and not the coaches, there's a lot you can show that happened on the field that point to that. If you think it's
Mhm.
the coaches and not the roster, there's a lot you can point to this Sunday. And I think
Mhm.
whatever side you come down on is probably whatever you had in your head beforehand, and this is just gonna confirm whatever it was. But yeah,
Yeah,
veteran tight
yeah.
end lining up offsides on offense, you don't see that very often.
Mhm. Yeah, and not to get too much into like the roster construction because we're gonna talk about that later. But you kind of put it in a perfect way. It's like both of those things could be true. Like the coaching staff might not be coaching too well, the players might not be playing too well in general. And I feel like that was like that's honestly like a common theme for this past week. That I even put the tweet out like the people that want the Patriots to draft an offensive tackle first, or just go get an offensive tackle. It was a great day for them to like prove their point. But the same could be said about like people that want them to draft a receiver. Like they didn't have a consistent receiving threat that was getting open and like I don't know, just giving he was not an, they didn't have an option on offense. I don't even know who other than who. Like they really didn't have anyone that was consistent throughout the game. So I just feel like there was a lot of themes of like this crowd got a lot of I put it in the words of like ammunition or ammo. Like they got a lot of talking points. But in the end, I feel like everyone's kind of agreeing and they don't really understand that because they're all like think they're on different sides of it. But in the end, it's like, no, we're seeing the same thing. Like things just need to improve overall. Like obviously at the end of the day, it's gonna come down to like what exactly that needs to look like, what that improvement needs to look like. But everyone sees something wrong. So it's like, I don't know. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. Like I really don't understand what needs to happen.
Do you think they need to make any like not major or well technically major like coaching changes, but like how are you guys feeling about the coordinators so far and just overall like Gerard Mayo's performance this season?
I actually just texted a friend about this right before the podcast, and the way I phrased it is, I think this goes for the front office too. I wouldn't necessarily like say anyone needs to go, but if anyone got fired, I wouldn't even like bat an eye that it happened. And I think this
Mhm.
goes for everyone from like your positional coaches all the way up to the GM, like everything in it. This team's on pace for potentially 3 wins by the end of this year, and if you only win 3 games, very rarely does that happen, and you're bringing back everyone.
Yeah.
But in specifics, I think Alex Van Pelt's doing an all right job. I actually think that defensively, DeMarcus Covington has done a decent job as like an actual play caller. I question some of the coaching that gets them like to the field. Like I think they're calling the right plays a lot of the time. The guys just aren't executing them, which is also a coaching issue.
All right. So with that being said, so you don't have an issue, I guess you could say, with Gerard Mayo's comments today that he's not going to take the play calling duties away from DeMarcus Covington.
I don't know. I may or may not have an issue with it. It kind of depends on the results, right? It's a results-based business. He has been his experiences on defense, and he's probably going to live and die by, well, one, Drake May, but two, how well the defense plays.
Mm-hmm.
If he refuses to step in on play calling and the defense continues to have issues, there has to be some kind of a change. And if you're not going to change the play caller or change the coordinator, it will eventually trickle up to the head coach. So I guess I hope he knows what he's doing is my response.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think Andrew, you could give your thoughts on this afterwards too, because I think that he's like the one issue I really, really struggle with Gerard Mayo is that like I could support him all I want, but he plays a lot of like the hypothetical game. And I don't know why, like that's kind of become his, I guess it's like, like what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word,
Like
like
his
fallback
MO?
plan. Just like his fallback plan. Like he kind of just says week to week when they lose, he's like, well, if this didn't happen, then like we would have won. Or if like the players had executed, then things would have gone differently. And it's like, yeah, obviously, but that didn't happen. And at some point it has to happen. So it's like I remember like I was more towards the beginning of the season. Maybe I haven't really paid attention to what he has said lately, but he would say it a lot that he's like, well, if they didn't get that error and get that touchdown, or if the other team didn't get this interception, then we would have won, or things would have been different. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's execution. Like you have to make that change. Like those things have to happen eventually. So it's kind of like you can play the hypothetical game, but something's not clicking for you to win that hypothetical game at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm not thinking too much of what he's like been saying, just because I feel like he's still trying to figure out how exactly to talk to the media. Just, I mean, he was a linebackers coach before he was a head coach. He was never a coordinator of any sort. He never really talked to the media a whole lot as a coach. As a player, yeah, he did, but as a coach, it's completely different. Like you really gotta like make sure what you're saying is on point. And like like at the beginning of the year, I feel like he was saying a little too much, and now he's starting to kind of try and backtrack a little bit. And I think part of that comes from the Crass maybe saying, "Hey, we want to rebuild our relationship with the media after letting Bill Belichick go," and him trying to be like really overly friendly, talking a lot. But now he's kind of starting to backtrack. So I'm not thinking about that too much, but I can see where you're coming from, definitely.
Yeah. I do think big picture, when your team loses a lot of games, no one's ever going to be happy with the answers in the press conferences. That said, nothing in them has really wowed you in a positive way. I agree. Like I feel like, especially in the beginning, he let reporters lead him on answers a ton. He would just kind of agree with whatever the person asking the question was like. Go, just follow that direction. I think he's gotten better at that. It was just experience. Yeah, I will say, if there's one thing I actually kind of like about him, one area where I think he is starting to find his footing on this. If we're talking about the press conferences and the media section, not being afraid to call out his players publicly. That's not something we ever saw under Belichick, but this is something that coaches do. You know, you play a sport where your job gets broadcast to millions of people every Sunday. Every single person can see when you make a mistake. This isn't a surprise to anyone, and it will get addressed. So when a coach just talk about it, a lot of times the players do seem willing to respond. Like there was a lot of uproar about the soft comments earlier this year, and then the players responded. And they were like, "Yeah, he's right. We got to be tougher." And then they went out and they were tougher. One thing, if you want to talk about a coach that struggled but got buy-in, had the culture and everything, it was Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
3-13-1 his first year, but they had an identity. I don't know that this team has an identity, but Mayo kind of being a guy who can be a player's coach who isn't willing to show some tough love publicly when it's warranted starts to feel like we're trending a little bit in a direction of where he wants to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I do agree with you. I do like that he does call out the players. I know like that's a big issue with a lot of the fans, a lot of the community. And he even mentioned, he got asked about it yesterday on WEI, that they said like, how do you feel about being compared to Bill Belichick, like for everything? Like anything he does, it's like, well, Bill did this or Bill had done that. This is the way Bill did it, and that's not the way Gerard's doing it. And it's like not to be rude, but like they fired Bill for a reason. Like they didn't fire him just to keep the same stuff that he was doing in the building and just like, have a repeat, but with a different person as the face of the, not the face of the Patriots, but just like leading the Patriots. So it's like, I completely agree with that. Like he's doing that differently from the way Bill Belichick did it. And like you said, the players are responding relatively well to it. Like, I know I haven't really seen much from the players in terms of what he said on Sunday about like when they crossed the white lines and everything, but I know like David Andrews backed him up today about it, and it's like
Christian Fourier too.
Yeah. There and who else? Someone else. Well, not even like players like openly talking about that in particular, but like look, James White continuously defends him. He's like, let him figure it out. I know Devin McCourty responded to that tweet saying
Bentley
like,
too went on Twitter. And
yeah, Bentley too. Yeah. See, it's like Devin McCourty was like, he put in quotes like laughing. He was like, "Oh, you're not 7-0," like with the question mark. And it's like it's true. Like all these players see it. Like it's not gonna just be a completely different, like all sunshines and rainbows when he becomes a head coach.
Yeah, and I feel like like numerous times this season we've seen. I mean, like you guys just mentioned, but also players currently on the roster, they continue to stick up for Gerard. They experience things that we outside of the building don't experience from him, and they constantly back him up. And I feel like a lot of the media talk that surrounds Mayo and just what quotes of his are kind of launched into the mainstream sports media and what's can be taken out of context is what also makes fans upset with him, with just his overall performance this season. But I mean, he like they got a lot of young guys on this roster, and I just feel like switching head coaches is not what you do as a functional and competent organization. And you need to continue to be able to build off of things. Gerard Mayo, like I said earlier, was not a defensive coordinator. He was a linebackers coach. This is his first time being a head coach. He has a lot of room to grow. And I feel like some of the things on the field that we see, like questionable mid-game adjustments or in terms of the game planning, all of that will improve as he goes through his career. Those are some things that all young head coaches go through in terms of struggles. They all kind of experience that. And obviously Mayo deserves his criticisms, but I feel like you really have to bring him back after this season and just try and build from there, continue to build up your roster and get more depth, because depth has been a huge issue for them. And we especially see it on the defensive end this season, especially in like that linebacker group when Jawan Bentley went down and Jelani Tavai had to step into that kind of field general role. They haven't really had great depth pieces to really step in and be that second force in the run game to stop the run. We've seen a huge like decrease in terms of their play at stopping the run. But yeah, overall, I just feel like you kind of got to give them another year after everything that has happened.
Well, to return to the game this past Sunday, from what you were saying, I thought they did a much better job defending the run against Miami, and they were doing it with like smaller players on the field. They'd go to their nickel package and they could still stop the run. And it was like, okay, that's a little improvement that we wanted to see. It didn't translate to stopping anyone in the passing game in no way. But to be fair, I was looking at some of the stats on this. Since Tua came back, even excluding the game on Sunday, Miami's had the top pass offense in the NFL by EPA per play. So they've been lighting it on fire through the air since he got back. So this may end up being a game where we feel awful after it. And then in 3 weeks, we look back at it and we're like, wow, they only gave up 34 points to that team. Hey, that's not too bad. We'll see what the context ends up making that look like. But yeah, the last 5 games will determine a lot on what you do with the Gerard Mayo situation. I don't think you necessarily have to fire him or anything for what's happened this year. But the team hasn't played well, and he's responsible for that. And if there are things that are happening internally that we don't know about that show a different picture, positive or negative, that's that'll probably inform the decision of where you go from here. I did think it was interesting. Evan Lazar in his mailbag today highlighted that at the I think his opening press conference, Mayo mentioned that he might not get every hire right the first time. And he was bringing that back around because there's talk about the coordinators and what you do there. And, that Dan Campbell team, they fired the defensive coordinator and brought in someone else. So maybe we see some other changes in the coaching staff going into next year, but Mayo stays. And you see, you got the young developmental quarterback, but it's a young developmental head coach and a young developmental GM as well. And you're building for what they can be in year 3, not what they are in year 1.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to bring it back to what you said earlier about like the Dan Campbell, the beginning of his era with Detroit, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it was the first year or second year that he was a head coach, but their offense was struggling a lot, and he took over offensive play calling duties. I'm like 70% sure that's what happened, because I vividly remember like that being a big talking point, that like he was going to take over. Maybe I'm completely wrong and this makes no sense with what I'm saying, but all I'm trying to say is that these last 5 games, I would like to see Gerard become a little bit more involved. And I'm not saying he's not involved at all, but just like have a little bit more say in what's going on during the game, because I feel like a lot of it right now is just he just feels comfortable saying like, you know what, like that's my offensive coordinator, I trust him. That's my defensive coordinator, I trust him. Like, should I challenge this play? They'll tell me from upstairs like if I should do it. Like, it's been a lot of him just relying on other people. And obviously there's things that we don't see, we don't know, that that he might be making the choice on his own. But I would like to see some more decisions that are blatantly like made by him.
Yeah, a lot of this seems too passive.
Yeah.
I think you were correct on the play calling, by the way. He did take over offensive play calling duties partway through that first year.
Yeah, see, I remember it was like a big controversy that they were like, this is like a defensive guy. And everyone was criticizing him because the offense played, I think they played, if I remember correctly, they played really well the first like time that he called the plays, or he like took over like halfway through a game, something like that. They did relatively well. Then the next game, they didn't do good whatsoever. And there was like this whole inconsistent thing of like, is he good at this? Is he not? Like, and then he gave it back to the play call, like the original play caller. It was like a whole like mess. And look where they are now. You know what I mean? Like they solved that issue, right? And it's like, if they had fired him after the first year, if they had just given up on him, who knows where the Lions would be right now. So yeah,
I think that's a really fair point too. But Matt, I know. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just the last one on that. The other part of this though is that Lions team did start like 0-11 or whatever it was, 10-1, and then they went 3-3 down the stretch. And then, they end the next season by winning at Green Bay to knock the Packers out of the playoffs. Even though they don't get in, it almost feels like a playoff win for the Lions with that environment and that situation. And that theme of trending up at the end of the year, I think, was really important towards, the mood in the decision-making process in the offseason. So 5 games left for New England. Right now, like four of them are against winning teams. Probably 4 of them are going to end up against playoff teams, depending on what happens with the Cardinals. So if you want to have that kind of stretch where you finish strong like that Lions team did, you got to win a game or 2 against a good team here.
Yeah.
Going off of what you just mentioned, looking forward to these next 5 games in terms of trying to build momentum and how perceptions can change about what changes need to be made. What are your guys' like main expectations moving forward? Or if you really don't have any expectations, like what are you just trying to look for in terms of improvement?
I think you want to find young players on the offensive line that you feel like can be part of the picture next year. I think that's the first thing. Right now, you have one starting job on the offensive line locked up for next year, in my opinion. That's going to be Mike Onwenu, probably at right guard. Every other spot is up for grabs. Andrews. We'll see what happens with David Andrews at center. But like Cole Strange is going to get an audition here to maybe audition for the starting center job next year. Michael Jordan cut. Mike Reese hinting at Layden Robinson stepping up at left guard. Layden Robinson's going to get probably an audition here to be a starter at left guard next season. I'm assuming with Arian Lowe at left tackle, he's probably just your backup left tackle next year in an ideal world. But then on the right side, right tackle is just a total. Demontre Jacobs has really struggled. City So got some playing time. Caden Wallace is going to come back at some point. You hope you see enough from one of those guys that you feel like they can at least be a backup for you next year.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I haven't even thought about it that way. Like those young guys are gonna have like their auditions for these final couple games. The one I just keep thinking about is Caden Wallace, just because it's the tackle position. They don't really have a future left tackle, in my opinion, on the roster currently. So Caden Wallace gives them that hopeful like right tackle of the future. Layden Robinson is, I don't know. I'm kind of like shaky about him. I don't know. It's they constantly give him chances, and it's like, oh, like he's shown a lot. Like you're gonna see today, like he's gonna be, he's like much improved, and then he gets pulled halfway through the game. Then in all fairness, it was against Jeffrey Simmons, but regardless, it's like he's someone that I'm kind of shaky on. And then Cole Strange, we have no clue how he's gonna return from that injury. I'm like interested to see how that's gonna go. But Caden Wallace is the one I'm really looking forward to.
I think Strange is like maybe the most interesting person on this line to me right now because first, if we go purely by PFF grade, what he did last year would make him the second best lineman on this year's team behind Michael Onwenu. He also, when he played last year, I believe had a knee injury because he got hurt early in camp. And if I'm remembering it all correctly, they said he was going to need surgery after the season anyway before he got hurt against the Chiefs at the end of the year. So he was doing that banged up after missing most of camp. Then you go back to his rookie year, it's Matt Patricia and that whole debacle on the offensive line. So he hasn't really gotten a fair opportunity at any point in his career to do something. And now it sounds like they're switching him to center. It sounds like Scott Peters had liked him as a center coming out of college. So it's a fresh start where he'll get to kind of take over with not a whole lot of pressure in the last couple games here whenever he does come in. And if you can get your starting center and he's young, that gives you that interior duo, especially because when he's a big guy and Strange has mobility. It's like two guys you can play off of one another with different skill sets. With a team that wants to run the ball, like that in theory allows you to do a lot of things. But also he might be just a guy and he's not even making the team next year. That's also totally on the table right now.
And I think there's like a slight misperception with Cole Strange. I feel like just because he was that huge, or we can say huge now, but at the time, or a little bit after the draft, it came out that he was going to be like a second rounder, most likely. But
Yeah.
Cole Strange being a first round pick, I feel like people just automatically look at that as a bad pick and associate the bad pick with him being a bad player, which I think is just in terms of his play when he's able to start gaining momentum when playing and really getting his feet set, he's been good. I mean, at the tail end of his rookie year, he really started to pick it up. And then he's been battling injuries throughout his career, like you mentioned, Matt. I just feel like when he's able to start gaining momentum, which he really hasn't been able to a full extent because of injuries, he's been a really solid guard for them. And I am really looking forward to see what they do with him playing at center and, like you said, auditioning at center. did they mention that they're gonna try him at guard, or is he like primarily gonna play center or practice
I
at
mean, I don't
center?
think just trying to read the tea leaves from what Mike Reese is saying, it sounds like they want Layden Robinson at left guard and Cole Strange at center.
Yeah.
But maybe they switch it up. It's these guys. Nobody's playing well enough to be locked into a job right now, as we saw with a starter literally getting cut this week. So they're liable to change this at any time until they find something that works, or just run out of weeks to play and we go into the offseason.
Yeah, and I think it's a really big not only is Cole Strange like trying to fight for a starting spot and just to stay on the team, but it's also a big deal for him in terms of the fifth year option too, because that's still on the table. I don't know. Obviously, like right now, it's like why would they pick it up for him? But if he's able to show something, and it's like you said, if he can show that he's the second best lineman on this team, and maybe that's not saying much, but that's continuity. That's someone that's going to be there with Drake May for the next 2 years at least. So it matters. And they have the money to spend too. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. I'm interested to see like what they're going to do with his fifth year option if he plays well.
Yeah. I know we talked a lot about the offense here, but we want to look at the end of the season. What are you guys looking at defensively over the next 5 games?
I mean, we mentioned it earlier with the execution, just looking for better execution out of the defense, especially in zone coverage. Whenever they play zone coverage, I mean, Carlos, you and I talked about it during that Rams game. That was awful. Like, they just couldn't rely on each other to pass their assignments effectively. They just overall, like we said, just haven't been executing especially like the DBs. They haven't been executing their job at an efficient level and effective level. But I feel like that also comes with the inexperience that's currently on that defense right now. I mean, I'm not like saying when I say or when I talk about Del Pettis like being out there, it's not like a shot at him. I feel like he's done a pretty good job for UDFA. Like him making the main roster in the first place was great in itself, and I think he's done a pretty good job with what he's been able to do. But like for example, him being out there and other inexperienced guys, that also contributes to that. So especially maybe if you get Jabril Peppers back, that starts to settle things a bit. So I'm mostly just looking for execution and improvement in that area.
What about you, Carlos?
It's tough just because I feel like the defense in particular has so many different like issues, and it's not like offense that it's like, oh, just add a left tackle and it should solve things. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but people just have a very simple view of the offense, I guess you could say. I feel like for defense, it's a lot more complex because it's like, sure, the DBs could be playing better. They could add a really good DB in the offseason, but the pass rush needs to improve a lot. And it's like vice versa. And then it's like linebackers. It's like Jawan Bentley, he went down and the whole linebacking core just completely crumbled. Like the whole second level of the defense is just, like it's like it started struggling really bad. So it's like it's tough just because I would like to say like, yeah, I want to see the defensive line get more pressure on the quarterbacks and just be wreak havoc, I guess you could say, but I'm not too confident in that. So like a more realistic outlook for me personally is just to see some turnovers. And I know that's like very simple, but just to see them get some sort of juice from the defense and just like get an interception, get a fumble recovery like they did with Gonzo. Just something like that. That's what I'm looking for just for the final couple games.
I think that's a really good point. And I think the things that you're kind of talking about go hand in hand because the fact that they haven't been able to like communicate and execute consistently means that there's just too many easy plays for offenses. So then you're not forcing turnovers because you're not challenging them. The quarterback's never worried about pressure back there, really. So they're never rushing throws. They're not hucking it up into space. Guys aren't tipping balls over the middle of the field because they're not close enough to make plays on it. Like they're not making their own luck there for any of that. I have a stat to bring up on this that I found yesterday. I was deep I've been deep into PFF grades the last couple days trying to figure some stuff out. So far this season, Kyle Duggar is one of the worst safeties in the NFL at zone coverage, like bottom 5 at zone coverage grade. He is around the same for last year. 2022 and 2021, he was top 11 in zone coverage grade each of those 2 years, which also coincided with him forcing a ton of turnovers and playing next to Devin McCourty. I think finding a way to get Kyle Duggar back to that level of play is probably your quickest answer to both of the things that you're talking about, because he can clean up the mistakes in the middle of the field and he can force turnovers, and he can, when guys make mistakes, he can make them right by just doing some of the stuff we've seen him do. But then he has a game like he had this past Sunday where he's involved in all 4 touchdowns that Miami scores.
Yeah. I think on Kyle Duggar specifically, you kind of just said it. He had his best seasons when he was playing next to Devin McCourty, like a true free safety, like deep safety. And not that I don't want Jabril Peppers on the team, because like he makes. You could argue that he makes a bigger difference. I'm not going to say which one makes a bigger difference, but you could argue that he does. But it's like Kyle Duggar stopped producing as well as he was when Jabril Peppers started playing alongside him, and I think it's kind of gone just quietly that, they don't have a true deep safety anymore. And I legitimately think that's when he was able to produce best. The numbers back it up. And does that mean that they get another safety and it's like a rotation of 3 and you have all 3 of them playing on the field together? Does that mean that one of Kyle Duggar or Jabril Peppers is gone? And that's going to fix, which sounds crazy, but it's like addition by subtraction. It's like you lose one of those guys and you improve in a way. Not to get into fantasy land, but I was playing Madden. I was playing a franchise with the Patriots. I traded Kyle Duggar and I got a free safety. And I had Jabril Peppers step in, in that Kyle Duggar role. So it's like, maybe that's the best course. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but yeah, I think he's just playing out of position right now. I think that's like the best way I could personally put it.
So I 100% agree, and that's what to me made going through the tape for this Sunday so shocking, is that I actually thought like Jalen Hawkins played free safety pretty well for them throughout the game, and Kyle Duggar was in like his strong safety role for a lot of it, and he was still struggling, which is like setting off some alarm bells for me. Could just be the foot injury and him coming back from that, trying to play through stuff. It just seemed like, he wasn't seeing the game as well, which I think the other thing we kind of forget about here was like when you're playing next to Devin McCourty is an incredibly smart player who's going to do a lot of really good work throughout the week to get you ready for game day. And like, maybe it's less so the positional stuff specifically, and more so that when you play next to Devin McCourty, he's just going to know what's going on really, really well and elevate you. And maybe they don't have that right now. But yeah, like the touchdown, there were 2 touchdowns that Duggar gave up. The first one to Jonnu Smith. He's in man coverage, and Jonnu Smith starts to block and then releases into the route. Duggar sees him start to block and says, "All right, I'm done here," and just drops into zone coverage and just lets him go. What are you doing? Like that's not coaching. That's a veteran player who's been a good player losing focus and not following through. The touchdown that Dolphins had on a screen to the left side, Jalen Hawkins is like yelling at Kyle Duggar, "Hey, get over on this screen pass so you can cut this off." And Duggar doesn't move. So then Hawkins is trying to go around him, and then they both go too far to the outside. There's a cutback lane right into the middle. So like they're not playing well together. I think multiple defenders mentioned after the game a lack of focus being an issue. And I heard that quote and then watched the tape, and I was like, I don't like this.
So building off of our talks on defense and our prior talks about offensive line play and other offensive issues, what are you guys looking for, or what do you guys think are the main team needs? Carlos, I know you wanted to do that little off-season talk, so I'm gonna have you start off with this. What are your main needs?
Well, I kind of hinted at it recently. Like it was literally just because I did a Patriots Madden franchise, and that's why That's the only reason why, like, I put that tweet out a couple of days ago about like my dream Patriots offseason acquisitions and free agency. But I genuinely think it's tough because whenever it's during the season prior to the actual off season for like when free agents are going to be available, like big name free agents, I would say like what 20% of them actually hit the open market, maybe even less. So it's like this free agency class could be really good and they could address like some of their biggest issues. Like I know I mentioned them signing Charvarius Ward and Trey Smith. Obviously T Higgins is like the big one, but who knows if they're even going to hit the open market. But with that being said, I do think that this is could potentially like this could all go this could literally be irrelevant by the time free agency comes around and like all these guys got extensions. But I could see them solving a lot of their biggest positional issues in free agency if they play it correctly. That's the only thing that it's like if Drake May has enough pool that people are excited about him, if there's good word of Gerard Mayo around the league that he's a good players coach, who knows if people might even see it like that, hopefully. And they can offer probably the most money out of everybody. So it's like they do have some positives linked to them, I guess, but they could genuinely solve a lot of issues in free agency and then have the flexibility of going best player available in the draft and just or trading back and just gaining capital. It's just like they could genuinely have a really good offseason. It's just it's all up to chance right now. And we'll see. We'll have a better we'll have a better outlook closer to the offseason, but as it looks right now, they could genuinely change a lot of things.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. And I think if you look at like the biggest needs, it's you got to go back to winning in the trenches on both sides of the ball right now. Uh, you need more pass rush. Got to find a way to do that. And obviously the offensive line has to get a lot better. If you look at defense, I don't think he's actually going to hit the open market, but the name that just stands out to me as a potential edge rusher who could hit the market is Khalil Mack. I don't think it happens. I think the Chargers keep him, but you put Khalil Mack into the Anthony Jennings role, and I think you feel a lot better about how this front seven is going to play, especially when now Jennings is a role player for you.
Mhm.
I like Charvarius Ward. He's having a down year this year, and he's, I think, 30 years old now. We're going to be 30 next year, so a little cause for concern. But like, they probably need one more depth guy at corner. Go sign like a Rasul Douglas or a guy of that level, and probably sign a guy like that, draft a guy in the middle of the draft, and feel decent about where you're going to be next year. Especially because I didn't think their corners were as bad as I thought they were going to be when I watched the tape. I think a lot of what happened was just like linebackers and safeties getting abused on Sunday. Like Marcus Jones is not a bad player. He's a corner 3 in this league. He's a good corner 3. Like you can live with him. You can put him in the old Miles Bryant role, and like you're never going to have any issues with him. And then on offense, it's receiver and offensive line. And then depth. Like you're pretty much looking for depth anywhere until you find better players. Like you're looking for depth at running back for sure, depth offensive line, depth maybe not receiver because they got a lot of young players there. Depth on defense. But like I put out an article on tackle today on Pat's Pulpit. They could realistically, depending on who hits the market, fix both tackle spots before you even get to the draft. There are some players who are pending free agents and whose teams may not be interested in bringing them back, where they're not going to be franchise players for you. They can get you to middle of the pack or better offensive tackle play until for the next 3 seasons, and then you figure it out then. And then that means you can go into the draft and pick whoever you think the best player is. If you want to if you draft or you sign T Higgins and a left tackle and a right tackle, and Travis Hunter is on the board when you're picking, you can just pick Travis Hunter and figure it out later. He's the most talented player in the draft. Pick him and figure it out.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. And I know you just kind of touched up on it, but it's been a big talking point just because they're sitting at number 4 right now, I believe.
Yeah.
They were sitting at number 6 in terms of their first round draft pick. But a lot of talk about should they take a receiver? Should they take an offensive tackle? And obviously that depends on free agency. but how would you guys feel about them going defense, whether it be a edge rusher, whether it be, like you said, Travis Hunter, Will Johnson? Because I know a lot of people are hyper focused on offense right now, which I don't blame them at all. But how would you guys feel about that?
I mean, free agency happens first. So I think a lot of it depends on what you're able to do there. People kind of skip ahead to the draft, but like they're going to have the opportunity to add a lot of veteran players before we even get there. And the draft will kind of be in response to that. There's a lot of good defensive players at the top of this class. There's no, I mean, maybe Travis Hunter is in this class, but like there's no elite level defensive players. I don't think there's a lot of really good prospects. There's no Aiden Hutchinson. There's no Miles Garrett. No Bosa, who is like, oh, we can just draft the pass rusher and figure it out later. So I think it will be. I have no issues with them going defense. I think it'll tell you a lot about what this front office and coaching staff wants from the defense with which type of player they choose to pick. Do they want a corner? Do they want a speed rusher? Do they want a defensive tackle? Do they want is it Mykal Williams from Georgia, number 7 overall recruit in his class, very raw as a pass rusher, but like an absolute freak of nature defensive end who kind of like Trayvon Walker a couple years ago. Like we think he'll still turn into something. He's a great athlete, so we'll just pick him and see what it turns into. So many different directions they can go in that I think it would tell us a lot about the team.
Yeah, and like you said, I think free agency is going to play a big role, obviously, and kind of like how I said earlier, like they could solve some of their biggest issues in free agency, and then take a luxury pick, I guess you could call it. Personally, my draft crush since before the season even started has been Deion Walker. I know they don't necessarily need a defensive. I mean, I think they need a defensive tackle, but they have money tied into Christian Barmore and Devon Gottschall now, so it's kind of like, why would they use a first round pick on a defensive tackle? But I'm tired of like the Eagles getting these stud defensive like in the trenches guys that are just freaks of nature. I would love if the Patriots could get someone like that. Deion Walker, what is he, like 6'6"? I think he's like 340, 350, maybe even bigger than that. Like he's he's like a specimen, and he's really fast and nimble too. He's the one guy that I'm like, if they're able to solve a lot of the issues in free agency, he's that one luxury pick that I would love for them to get.
Well, I look at defensive tackle too, and like I think it's easy to say that it isn't a need, but sometimes the spots that aren't the need, when you improve them, they can kind of become like a force multiplier for you. Because if you add another good defensive tackle, now that means that Barmore is going to get more single teams. It means that Keon White is going to get more single teams. It means that you might have multiple interior pass rushers, which is just going to like wreck other teams and be really tough to run against and, just be a nightmare. And then it also means that like Barmore can rotate a little bit more. Godshaw can rotate more. Equale or Farms or Jaquel and Roy or whoever you want as your depth guy can rotate more. Everyone's fresher, which means you can just beat up on opponents for a full 60 minutes and you're not going to get worn down in games. That's why I was a big proponent of them signing Christian Wilkins actually this past offseason, which they didn't do. And I think this team would be in a lot better spot right now with a player like that next to Barmore. But no, like that's Mason Graham's another guy, defensive tackle from Michigan, who's probably going to go in the top 10. And he's not like a super freak of nature dude, but he's quick. He's got great hands, really good like nose for the football. I'm like, all right, if you're just like what Philly has, if you're just always going to be really good in the trenches on defense, you're going to have a chance. Like if you want to make Christian Ellis look better in your linebacking core, have 2 defensive tackles up front who are just going to like maul the offensive line. And now the linebackers don't have to think. They just have to hit because there's nowhere for guys to run. Like it can make things. And then because of that, you can play lighter linebackers, and the lighter linebackers are better in pass coverage. Now you're fixing that issue. Like it can all snowball into solutions for you.
And moving on to Patriots and Colts preview for this Sunday. This can be a good get right game for this team on offense and on defense especially. So what are your guys' main thoughts as we head into Sunday?
You can go, Matt.
Yeah, I'll take this. I'm first of all, just as a neutral football fan, very interested in Anthony Richardson and everything with his development. Um, and I kind of like this game's interesting to me because I think the Colts offense has aspects of the Bears offense that really struggled against New England, and also aspects of the Dolphins and Rams offenses that did so well. Like they can do um, all the motion stuff and the running game causing stress at the second level to pass over your linebackers. Like they can do that. You also have a receiving core that isn't anything super special. I think Josh Downs is probably going to be out on Sunday as well, and a quarterback who's been very inconsistent and who's young. One area of strength, I think, with this defense has been their third down packages. I think have gotten really good. So, like, all right, if you can stop the run and get Anthony Richardson into third and long, and then throw Brendan Schooler out there on a blitz, I feel pretty good about New England's chances. The flip side, if you go out there and you can't stop the run at all, you might have a rookie quarterback come into Foxborough and put up 30 points on you. And that kind of performance is the type of thing that will get coaches fired. So I think this is a very important game. I'm looking at a lot of the defense right now. Offensively, the Colts have a very simple defense. So I just want to see, the cover 3 defense, just like what the Bears have played. I think that they can I think they're going to have a lot of answers for what the Colts want to do. And I think we're going to see a good Drake May day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out perfectly. I do think it's like a very important game that people aren't really thinking about it like as important as it should be right now. It's just one of those teams, like you said, this is one of those games, or just like someone that you match up against, that it's like this could get a coach fired depending on if they lose and if it's like a really bad loss. Um, if I'm being honest, the one guy, which is crazy to think, the one guy I'm really worried about, and I'm expecting a big game from him, is Alec Pierce. And I know that might be random, but I just think that if they do have Gonzo shadow Michael Pittman, I think Alec Pierce is just gonna have a field day. What is he, 6'4", 6'3"?
So Alec Pierce, he played at Cincinnati, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
Because if I'm remembering this correctly, the first game of tape I ever watched from Marcus Jones was when Houston played Cincinnati, and I just he got mossed like 3 times by Pierce in that game. It was like I'm watching Marcus Jones cover people perfectly, and then they're still making the catch. I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. Here we are 3 years later, and it's still happening in the NFL. Yeah, I would not love that matchup for New England.
Yeah, that's the one matchup that I'm genuinely worried about. They caught a break with Josh Downs being out most likely, but I mean, AD Mitchell's on that team too. Like I think he has like I might be wrong, but it might have changed since I last heard it, but I think he had the highest rate of targets per route run. It's just that he wasn't playing a lot for the longest time. So it's like you could take that with a grain of salt, but I'll just go back to Alec Pierce. I just genuinely think that I think he's going to have a great game. That guy, he used to be a volleyball player. I think he had like a 40-inch vertical at the combine. You just throw it up to him. Marcus Jones is guarding him. He's going to make a play. Like they could do that every single time. So I don't know what they're going to do, but that's one guy that I'm really worried about.
And Matt, going
Andrew,
off
what are you
of
looking for?
going off of your point about the Colts' simple defense, I feel like this can be a get right game for the run game, which we haven't seen really flourish since early or very early in the season. And I think part of what will make Alex Van Pelt's offense so successful, his West Coast offense, is establishing the run, which is so pivotal. But with the offensive linemen that you currently have out there, they're just simply not good enough to have an effective run game. It's not like Scott Peters and Alex Van Pelt are asking them to like do too much. They just can't get it done. It's just the players not being able to get it done. And I think, another thing I'm looking for, like we were talking about earlier, at the end of the season, is improvement in the run game offensively. And I think this can be a game where they can start to try and build some momentum. I kept telling myself that throughout the season. It hasn't really happened, like stacking games on each other, but hopefully we can see that on the offensive end this Sunday.
Well, I think with the bye after, it's a really nice spot to hopefully put a good game on tape, take that momentum into the bye, and then build on it in practice. Maybe you go 0-4 down the stretch. It's a tough group of opponents, but you could still build momentum in that. All right, we're going to play some competitive games. That's what the Cardinals did last year, and I think that's the last 4 games is so interesting because you play a Cardinals team that was kind of in this spot last year. You got to play a Chargers team, which is also kind of it was in the same boat as New England at this point last year, and you get the Bills twice in 3 weeks to finish the season. You're a big division rival, and you drafted the quarterback so he can be your Josh Allen. So you get to see them face off and see where they are. And even if you go 0-4, if you can be competitive in any of those games, I think you can take that into the offseason. I know that was some positivity. You guys want a little negativity about this game? Both starting left tackle, who I believe for this one, we haven't had the injury reports out this week, but they've had Matt Gonsalves starting at left tackle, rookie out of Pitt. He was drafted like 15 spots after the Patriots took Caden Wallace, and he has been very good at left tackle for the Colts so far. He's started the last 5 games, something like that. He's not like an elite player, but he's been like a solid guy early as 3rd-round left tackle, which is impressive. And as someone that liked him coming out and wanted the Patriots to draft him, it's a little bit tough to see him still on the board. The Patriots pass, and he goes to the Colts and plays well. But maybe they can blow him up on Sunday and give the rookie left tackle a tough game if he's the one that's playing.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. So
I did.
Yeah, that was negative.
I forgot he ended up on the Colts until I was watching the last game today, like scouting for this. I was like, wait, who is that at left tackle?
Yeah, so I think we're going to finish up tonight with our final game predictions for this Sunday. Matt, we've been hammering you with questions, so I'm going to give you a little break for a sec. Carlos, if you want to start us off with this.
I think it's going to be maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think it's going to be a close game. I think that they're going to have a different mentality going into this game. I feel like the Patriots like to play to their opponent's level, and I'm not saying that when they're really good, they're going to play really good. I'm just saying that when they play a team that's vulnerable and hasn't shown much, they kind of thrive in that situation. The Bears are like a perfect example. So with that being said, I think they win. It's throwback week 2, I'm pretty sure. I think they win in the red uniforms. I think Drake May is going to have a great game. In all honesty, I think he's going to have a get-right game. Or just, he had a down week last week. I think he's going to have a better week this week. I'll put it like that. I'm going to go with the score of – this is on the fly, actually. I think I'm going to go with 27-18. I'll go with that. Yeah, 27-18. I think the Patriots are going to pull this one out. Maybe they don't score that many points, but I do think they win. And I think the defense is going to – actually, I just remembered that Jonathan Taylor's a factor. We haven't even talked about him. Wait. I'll go 27-23. Okay. I think the Colts are going to score more than I'm like assuming they will.
I like where your head's at. I'm thinking like Pat's like 24-16. I think they're going to show up. I think they're going to bounce back from last week. Like the culture seems people have taken this negatively. I actually didn't mind it, that apparently after the Miami game, like the mood in the locker room wasn't that negative. And I kind of think that's a good thing at this point. Like you don't want an angry locker room at this point. You want guys still being able to be confident and building for the future. And like I think they left their best effort out there on the field on Sunday. It wasn't an effort issue. They just didn't play very well. It's football. That happens sometimes. Miami's a good team. Carry some positivity into this one. And if they could execute, that's kind of the key for them for almost every game this year defensively. If they execute on early downs, make Anthony Richardson beat you through the air, I think you'll win this football game. And it'll be like 24-16. There's definitely also a world where this is, a 30-20 Colts win because you can't stop the running game. But I think with Mapu back, Duggar actually did pretty well as a run defender. Mapu has done well as a run defender. Anthony Jennings had a good game last week and bounced back. Devon Godshaw had a good game. I thought Quale had a lot of guys had good games last week. You play like that this week, you'll stop the run. You force Richardson to throw. You might get a turnover, and I think you'll end up taking this one heading into the bye.
I do think they pull out in the end, and I think it'll be like 20. Pats win 24, 21. I think that's what I got going here, and I think this ties in perfectly with what you were saying throughout the entirety of tonight's show, Matt, is Jonathan Taylor and being able to stop that Colts run offense. I know you also mentioned them looking much improved in the run game last week against Miami, and I think again we've been talking about building off of decent and good performances. This is a game where you can try and continue to build off of a decent performance and continue to reinforce your run defense. So I think that is what I'm going to be looking for mainly, aside from Drake May. Aside from Drake May, that's what I'm looking for mainly on Sunday.
What does it say about the state of the team right now that Drake May had like a 40-something yard touchdown on 4th and 15, rolling out, throwing the ball way down the field to a tight end, and we're just like not talking about that?
That is true. Yeah, I honestly forgot about that play.
Well, it's just like it's become so normal to see him do crazy things, and like it feels like we're so not worried about the quarterback position in relation to the everything else that's going on that it's like, oh sweet, all right. Nice. Let's talk about the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah, it's very nice. I feel a lot better about May at this point in his rookie year than I did about Mac Jones at this point in his rookie year.
100%. Yeah.
And that's with losing with Drake May and winning with Mac in his rookie year. Mm-hmm. So I think that says a lot. But I do think that wraps up our show tonight. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a decently long time in the making, so we really appreciate being able to talk pass with you tonight and hopping on. You can find him, or you know what, Matt? Where can the people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Matt St. Dream. I'm also on Blue Sky now at Matt St. Jean over there. If you're over there, and then find me some articles on Pat's Pulpit and with Pat Lane on the CLNS network of podcasts. Patriots Press Pass is the YouTube channel you can find us on. So we do shows, every Sunday after every Pats game, and then Wednesday night. So we'll be live tomorrow night about 10 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Go check out Matt's stuff. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
No, just thanks for having me on. This has been fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, no, I've had a great time. Great time talking Pats with you guys, as always. But yeah, go check out Matt's stuff. I'm at NSPGS on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Carlos, he's at Los Talks Pats. We'll let you guys know when we're going live again, probably next week. And yeah, so tune into that, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.